This is the first in a series of lectures offered by the Historic Hill Association. John Bagwill and I will lead you through the story of the Old Stone Mill, the real story.
The real story.
John, what do you think? Are you going to tell me what's going on here, or are we going to guess
No,
what our conclusions are?
Go ahead. I think I recognize that building over there on the right.
Oh, you do? Okay.
It's the one here.
It's a very nice building, yes, I know.
Yeah.
Here's a depiction of a rendering of what it looked then and what we know it to be now. Okay? It's a little different. Back then, actually, it was 3 feet higher, and we'll talk more about that later. John, what do you think about the now?
Yeah, the last time I remember seeing had ivy on. When was that?
That was, you'll see that later.
All right. Well, a few years ago, Jan said to me, John, why don't you help me, you're a historian, why don't you help me look into the history of who built the stone tower? And I said, well, Jan, we all know who built it. The Vikings. He said, well, that's what some of the theories. But he said, why don't we look into it? So we looked into it, and I'll tell you, after a couple of years of research, we have found the real story. And it's a story based upon historical facts, but also supported by scientific evidence. And I look forward to sharing our conclusions with you. Take
Good.
it away.
All right, thank you. I will. Okay, so what you're going to note in here, you're going to find some of the material from papers done by an organization called Gray and Pape. We had no sooner than finished our research than the city of Newport was given the workings of an outfit in province called Gray and Pape, a professional organization that did the study on the tower. Ironically, theirs and our findings were identical.
Surprise, surprise.
So I had spoken to the owner of Gray and Pape, and he gave us permission to use all of his findings to support ours and refer to it.
All right. Now, I think one of the things that are pretty important to us is the fact that the land on which this tower stone mill sits is sited. The land was there, obviously purchased by Benedict Arnold back in the 1600s, 1656, but there was no reference made to the tower. And individuals who bought property in those days, they didn't have people going out and doing measurements and so forth as they with the technical, but they did customarily note any major edifices or whatever on the land.
Improvements, yes.
Improvements, and there was no mention at all of this stone mill on the tower on the land when the land was purchased by Benedict Arnold in 1656.
Don't you remember back then? You were around back then, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, I may be an old guy, but my memory gets a little hazy.
Okay.
Now, y'all, why don't you take it over? You pulled this piece together.
Yeah, the one in Wise, obviously you can read that the Harpers, they told to us about the history of the property. Okay? Well, you will see in the following pages who built it and who owns it. But it was because of the Easton mills had blown down by a storm that King Charles II of England asked Benedict Arnold to build a substantial mill to support the local needs.
And at that point, substantial meant something that wouldn't be blown down by the next hurricane. Even they hadn't called, I don't know if they called them hurricanes then, but
Storm.
Anyway, I think another point made in this article was that even in 1854, people were curious about this edifice that was in Newport, and they found that the studies of the mortar in the tower and the stone were the same identical mortar and stone that was used in the construction of Benedict Arnold's house, and which has now been torn down. But another piece of evidence that says this was all put together at about roughly the same time.
Connection between Benedict Arnold and the Old Stone Mill.
And the Old Stone Mill, that's correct. Sorry. Yep. So, go ahead.
Okay, so fortunately we were able to find the original will at Brown University, and the librarian there was kind enough to forward us a photograph of the requisite pages of the mill. Here they are. And I defy you to read it, so we made it simple for you. Here is a section of the will that refers to the Old Stone Mill. Okay?
As a matter of fact, it says he's leaving his belongings, etc., and also my stone-built windmill. Now, people say, well, it was his because it was on his property, but that doesn't prove that he built it. Well, that's basically when people develop these theories about the Vikings or whatever. What they did was they would set up a story, then they collect facts to support the story. And what we're finding now, of course, is that we looked for the facts which led to the story. But go ahead.
Yes. Well, as mentioned in previous slides, the deeds from the previous owner made no reference to the mill. So there, okay, there.
Here we are.
Here we go. Go ahead, John. You know
All
about
right,
this
well,
one.
Several years ago, I received a picture, if you will, or a drawing on a story about a mill built in England called the Chesterton Mill. And the reason this friend of mine sent it to me was that it was a similarity to the Benedict Arnold Mill. And that basically was one more piece of evidence that suggested to us that there was a connection. Now, for years, people thought, well, Benedict Arnold lived and grew up right near this mill, so he knew it from his memory. That was later on established as not true. He was actually born and lived in his early years several miles from this mill. But in Newport, there were people who from England, obviously, and they were stonemasons. And when Benedict Arnold said he needed to build a substantial mill that meant stone, one of the stonemasons said, well, I know of a mill. I'm speculating here, but how else would you find out? And so that's the reason why the Newport Mill looks so much like the one built by Indigo Jones. Now, people have looked at this Indigo Jones mill. I'm going to back up to the other slide for a second. And they said, well, that looks a lot like some of the buildings that I've seen in Portugal and other parts of Europe. And they're probably true. Because Indigo Jones was a famous architect selected by this very wealthy man who organized the construction of this. And he did that because of Indigo Jones' familiarity with classic architecture in Europe at that time. And a good reason why it probably looks like yours. Go ahead.
So here we have renderings of what the Chesterton windmill might have looked like, or did look like, and the construction procedures and designs of our old stone mill. Pretty similar.
Well, actually, this mill, the Chesterton mill, has been restored, and all the mechanics are there, sails are there, etc., etc. I don't know if it grinds any grain or not, but that's an accurate restoration of how it looked then and how it looks today. Yours.
The model you see below the screen is a scale model of the mill as it is now, and plans are to construct the actual wind generator in the near future. John?
Now, I had heard that there was a map up in the Massachusetts Historical Society that might be relevant to our research. And guess what? It was more than just relevant. It was really point on. And it was a map drawn in 1712 to 13 and copied by the noted Ezra Stiles in 1760. And you can't see it on this, but on the next slide, there were several windmills, as you can see.
Eastern windmills up top?
Up at top. And on the next slide, I believe you're going to see a blow-up that we had done of one of the mills on the property that would have belonged to Benedict Arnold. Amazing, isn't it? How in this, a map drawn, the Mumford map, has a mill that looks identical to the tower that stands at Newport today. And then from a Newport Historical Society, one of their magazines, there's a drawing of Benedict Arnold's estate, and way in the distance you'll see the windmill. So again, another piece of historical evidence to support our story and conclusions.
And the building in the foreground is a Benedict Arnold house, okay, on Spring Street, showing that on his land in the background is the mill.
And then, of course, there's the Styles in 1758. After copying the Mumford map, does his own drawing of the area, and there we see something that looks very familiar. A blow up of I'm not sure exactly.
The lot right here.
Right.
This lot right
here.
Yep.
Take a look, and there's a blow up again. So in 1758, here is a mill about 100 years after we believe it was constructed. Of course, without the sails and without the mechanics. But go ahead.
So here, the uses obviously were, as in those days needed, to convert hay into a grain.
Not hay. Wheat.
Wheat, hay, it was
Whatever.
referred to as a hay mow. But yes, hay mow. Okay.
And then we have back in again 1854. I mean, that's all 200 years after the mill was built. But that mill was used for several decades, and there were people in their late 80s in Newport at that time who remembered their grandfathers talking about delivering grain to be milled, at that particular mill. And if you can, when you read that slide, that excerpt right there, you'll see some of this. And so there were people in 1854 who had connections through family to people who told stories about this particular, about the uses of this mill. Go ahead.
Okay, so what we have found in our books and so forth, the reference to the Old Stone Mill and the Antoinette Downing and Vincent Scully book. People know that, and it talks all about the existence of a mill and its location.
Now, this is kind of an interesting story because of the way this rendering was found. Jan Slee was sitting one day in an attorney's office, and I guess he noticed up on the wall a painting.
A property attorney.
Property, well, yeah, right. That doesn't surprise me, given Jan's reputation for dealing frequent contacts with attorneys. But nevertheless, take a look way out there. Can you believe it? There is the stone tower, and stone mill. If you look at it closely, that's taller than it is today. And if you notice that, you'd be absolutely correct. But it was no longer used as a mill when that was when that rendering was prepared. Go ahead, Jan.
So would you stop kicking the tower?
All right.
Go ahead, John.
Anyway, Jan and I had heard there was a painting over at the Redwood that we had to take a look at, and here is a copy of it, picture of it, and it's the original hanging in the Redwood Library. It was done by Gilbert Stewart between 1770 and 1775, and once again you'll see that the stone mill is about 3 feet taller than the one today, and we'll tell you why in a moment. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, John. You like this one?
Well, yeah, right. As I said, our goal was to identify and develop historical facts and see where they took us. Well, they took us to the fact that, to the conclusion that Benedict Arnold built this. But then we wanted to know if there was this scientific evidence to support this. And of course, because we're showing it, it meant we found it. And the following 4 slides show the scientific evidence that supports this. So if you take a look, we'll continue on. 1948 to 49, an archaeological dig was organized, and they found over 1,600 artifacts, including, guess what? Fragments of a grist mill stone. Now, people can still be doubters. Well, this kind of, in our view, kind of wraps things up. This was the original site, the original mill. That's what it was used for. And when they found this right here, all these items are now stored, cataloged at the Newport Historical Society. Go for it.
Okay, so subsequently, carbon dating was done on the mortar of the tower, confirming timing. And I'll show you the legend here. Legend, and it brought the findings back to the 1680s, which is around the time that Bennett Earl declared ownership. So we have carbon dating to help us. Okay, here again, some more details offered in the Journal of Historical Society, Part 2, 2000. So we've got several. We've got the Godfrey confirmation, and we've got the findings found by Historical Society. Oops. The 5 slides, Newport landmark over the years. Here are some photos that I'd found over time to show you the different times of the mill. Here's an early one. This is a postcard, ironically. I've been finding.
I want to interrupt you for a second.
Sure. Please.
We pointed out the fact that today's stone mill is 3 feet shorter than it was originally. And what we neglected to tell you is why. Well, during the Revolutionary War, as you know, Newport was occupied by the Brits. And this had been used as not only to store ammunition, but it was also used as a lookout tower. And their goal was to knock this thing down. So they put some dynamite or a gunpowder at the top, and they lit it, expecting it could tumble the tower down. Well, this, as a proof, we found out, obviously, it's still there. So it was strong enough not only to survive hurricanes, but the Brits' attempt to blow it apart. But that's the reason why it's now 3 feet shorter than it was originally. Go ahead.
Here's what it looked like in 1835, showing the harbor in the background, and I believe that's Goat Island. 1854. So these are all photos or renderings that we've seen in our research. Unfortunately, somebody had asked and said, the tower looks so awful, the mill looks so awful, let's cover it with ivy. Well, that didn't last long, because soon thereafter they removed the ivy. Okay? Well, in the background you will find a one-time owner of the mill. There was a Gibbs that lived here, as well as originally built by John Tillinghast in 1758. The tower in the background, and there was on Touro Park a music stand. No longer. Here are photos taken in 2015, 2022. So we are current as to the findings inside. Notice that in the top of the tower, the tower is owned by the state of Rhode Island. They tried to do some repair work. Well, they didn't do too good a job. Sorry.
Now I want to point this out. Jan invited me to participate in the historical research, but let me tell you, here's a slide, and you say, well, and here Jan put this together. Here are all the owners. There was no one place to go to find the owners. You don't. Jan didn't call up the library and say, "Can you give me a list of the owners?" No way. Through his diligence and research at the town hall and the records, he has come up with a list of the owners. Now this, frankly, unless you are one who focuses and interested in digging in detail, you wouldn't do this. But Jan, give him credit. He put this together, and take it from here, Jan.
Yeah, it was interesting finding out the owners. because some of them were in conjunction with the people who owned the house that was adjacent to it. Okay, here is an overview. Unfortunately, Google Earth has not done a newer photo since 2015, or newer shot overhead, but here's what the park looked like in 2015. This spruce tree reference is no longer there. It was taken down by a strike of lightning subsequently. Okay, here is a drawing rendering showing all the paths that existed at one time. They're not all there. Okay, but it also shows you the different types of trees that we have in the park. We've lost a couple of them since. Here we have the tower as it was in 2017. And here we have a closer photo of the tower that sits in front of the screen, below the screen, that was made in 2017 and matched stone for stone. All the windows are accurate, and there you go.
Well, no. Jan is not typically a modest fellow, but he did
Excuse me.
point out that he is the one who built this model right here. So
Yes.
he didn't say that, but I'll say it for him.
The stones, the pebbles come from Brenton Beach, and the slate pieces, which are right here, are fragments of my slate roof. In doing so, I had to use a glue gun. I have since, because of that, lost my fingerprints. So the FBI can never find me.
Not that they'd want to.
Who knows? So here is there's a tablet in the southeast corner of the park, which, as you can see, has lost some of its paint. I have a rendering of a tablet, a covering of the tablet in copper that we're going to put on it once we get some funding.
I might add this little background story. Several years ago, Jan went to the mayor of Newport, not the present mayor, and asked for this, suggested this plaque, and attributing, of course, the mill to Benedict Arnold. And he said, "No way." He said, "As far as I'm concerned, that Middletown is concerned, the tourists are concerned, this was built by the Vikings." So
He wanted mystery to stay alive.
that's right.
Okay, so this Historic Hill Association is sponsoring a series of lectures. We're going to be having a couple more in April and May. And then John and I will be working quite heavily on an e-book white paper. We didn't give you all the details because we didn't really want to bore you to death. Okay, particularly John when he talks. But you know, it's fine. So so we are going to write the white paper, and we'll make it available as soon as we get it done. It's going to take a while. There's a lot of research we're going to put into it. We've got a couple additional people who were involved in the research at Graham Pape. They're going to help us. So there we go. And thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed it, and let us know what you think. John, thank you for coming. Thank you for helping.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for asking me to participate in this several years ago.
I know, it's painful. Bye all. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.